1997 was the official first season for the WNBA, the newest U.S. women's professional basketball league at the time. The WNBA's main appeal was simply that it was backed by the NBA. There had been multiple other U.S.-based women's professional leagues. The ABL, for example, was already in full swing and offered a substantially higher salary, but the WNBA was looking for longevity. The WBL launched and folded in the early 80s. The WBA and WABA would start and fold within the same year, strategically launching after the women's basketball surge in 1995 and 1996. The WNBA had Olympians and college stars such as Sheryl Swoopes, Rebecca Lobo, and Lisa Leslie to headline their league. To give it a fighting chance, the WNBA would play in the NBA's off-season, sign Olympians that didn't go to the ABL, and made sure regional stars stayed as local as possible to stir fan bases. They even had a little star power in their coaches, like Cheryl Miller being named the head coach of the Phoenix Mercury. On January 22, 1997, the WNBA held its first allocation draft. The league's first 16 players were allocated to teams, an experienced group comprised of Olympians and collegiate stars. The league allocated the best 16 players to the 8 teams, 2 to each team in no particular order, though each team did receive a big and a guard, with a few players being strategically placed in their hometown or where they went to college. Vicky Bullitt and Andrea Stinson went to the Charlotte Sting, Stinson going to school at NC State and Bullitt in Maryland. Michelle Edwards was assigned to the Cleveland Rockers as she went to college in Iowa. Sheryl Swoopes was sent to the Houston Rockets. She was a star from Texas Tech that still holds many of their records to this day. USC star Lisa Leslie was able to play with the Los Angeles Sparks, along with Long Beach State alum Penny Toler. Rebecca Lobo was assigned to the New York Liberty, a UConn star from the 35-0 championship run from 1995 that was still fresh in everyone's minds. The placements weren't solely based on college location. The skill had to be evenly dispersed to have a competitive league. It couldn't be too redundant, or someone like Cynthia Cooper would have went to the Sparks along with Lisa Leslie. So each of the teams had starting points and cornerstones with proven skills to keep building out the teams with experience and quality play. February 27, 1997, an elite draft was held. This was the first draft the teams were actually selecting players. This talent pool was made up of professionals who competed in other professional leagues. The draft order was determined by the league. Each team added an additional 2 players and went into the inaugural college draft with 4 players to build around. Dina Head was selected first overall in the elite draft by the Utah Stars. Other notable names from the elite draft are Kim Hampton, number 4 overall, and Vicki Johnson that went to the New York Liberty. Lynette Woodard would go to the Rockers in the second round of the elite draft. The first woman to play for the Harlem Globetrotters, the Rockers also had Lynette Woodard there to put up stats and help win games, but also put fans in the seats. Even after being out of the game for a little while, she was still putting on a show. Nancy Lieberman was the second to last pick that went to the Phoenix Mercury, who, interestingly enough, played in the ABL and WBL. A majority of the players in the elite draft played overseas, but also could have graduated from college a decade prior. So all these players would have experience and probably really want a spot, as it would be their last chance to play professional basketball. The teams finished the elite draft with 4 players and insight to draft picks for the college draft. The next 4 roster spots on each team would be filled by the WNBA draft on April 28th. After the college draft, they would hold invitation-only tryout camps in mid-April. The 9th and 10th players and 2 developmental players would be added through local team tryouts in mid-May. April 19, 1997, the WNBA and Spalding introduced the league's official orange and oatmeal game ball. This would go on to be their signature colors a couple decades later, and that orange is still iconically tied to the WNBA. April 28, 1997, the first WNBA draft was held. Tina Thompson would go down as the first number 1 pick in WNBA history. Selected by the Houston Comets, she was joining Sheryl Swoopes and Cynthia Cooper. Pamela McGee was selected 2nd overall, going to the Sacramento Monarchs. That same Pamela McGee, who was actually teammates with Cheryl Miller and Cynthia Cooper during their time at USC. There weren't any big trades, and the team spent the next month or so signing developmental players and hiring coaches. On June 21st, 1997, the New York Liberty and the Los Angeles Sparks played in the first ever WNBA game at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles. Penny Toler scored the league's first points, and the New York Liberty would go on to win the first game 65-57. The WNBA was played closer to FIBA and collegiate rules at the time. They played with two 20-minute halves rather than 4 quarters. The league made the changes to 4 quarters just ahead of the 2006 season to give teams more time to rest and make adjustments. Over the years, the rules have been adapted to match closer to the NBA. So at the time, we're missing charges under the basket, players being able to call timeouts, the clear path foul, and of course, there were no coaches' challenges. The WNBA's first season was electric. These women were ballers, and they had dedicated fans loving the newest basketball product. The New York Liberty were led by Rebecca Lobo and Teresa Weatherspoon. Teaspoon brought that energetic leadership and gritty know-how, keeping her team engaged. Rebecca Lobo was still on her hot streak, including not losing a game all through college and the Olympics. And then to start the WNBA season, the New York Liberty won their first 7 games. Off to a hot start, but they did hit a slump midway through the season. They were able to find themselves battling out a couple of runs down the stretch and securing their slot in the playoffs. But throughout the season, they were definitely one of the teams to beat. The Phoenix Mercury had Cheryl Miller as their coach, showing off a lot of spirit with her fits and moves. She's got a legendary basketball mind and a strong personality, excellent leader in personal skills, and the ability to reach her players. It was proved there in Phoenix as she captured the locker room. The team was led on the floor by Michelle Timms, the Australian superstar that had just participated in the 1996 Olympics against the Women's USA Dream Team. The Mercury got off to a strong start, taking out the big teams like the Sparks. They hit a roll bump midway through the season, losing 6 straight. When Timms went down and got sick, it really hurt their momentum, but they found a way to keep a leg in the playoff standings towards the end of the season. The LA Sparks had stars in Lisa Leslie and Penny Toller, but they were off to a horrible start. With a 4-7 record and a star-studded team, they were losing close games. Linda Sharp was replaced by Julie Russo and gave the Sparks the spark they needed to find an edge of motivation, bringing them together, and it actually gave them a strong run midway through the end of the season. The Cleveland Rockers weren't doing bad, but they weren't doing great either. With no real leadership, you could tell they were looking for some identity and some leadership on the floor, and it only got worse when they lost their starting point guard, Michelle Edwards. She went down with a knee injury and was out for a good chunk of the season. But when she did return, the Rockers would go on an 8-game winning streak. Edwards led her team through this fight back and tussle for any slot in the playoffs, capping off this comeback with a game winner against the Liberty in the final days of the season, just to keep any hope alive of the Rockers making the playoffs. The Sacramento Monarchs' saving grace was Ruthie Bolton. She came in extra hot, averaging 21 points. She was actually the league's first player of the week, but she really was doing it all on her own. She needed help if they could capitalize on her excellence. The team needed an offensive identity and defensive identity. After a rough start and a 5-game losing streak, they changed coaches as well, hoping to string together a few wins to keep their playoff hopes alive. The Charlotte Sting were one of the fan favorites, as they were able to keep the trio of Shannon Manning, Rhonda Mapp, and Andrea Stinson together, as they were NC State college teammates. Andrea Stinson led the Sting, and they played very well on their home floor, though they had one of the worst records in the league on the road, so that meant they had a lot of trouble keeping a win streak going. The Houston Comets were a loaded team filled with talent and athleticism, a dynamic coach in Ben Chancellor. They immediately felt strides ahead of the other teams. They were known for having focus on the court and fun off the court, which helped with their chemistry. Sheryl Swoopes was out for a majority of the first part of the season after giving birth to her son, but that gave way for Cynthia Cooper to take advantage and lead the team on and off the court. Her coach and teammates give her a lot of credit for leading that Houston Comets team. The Utah Stars would get off to a bad start and have trouble throughout the majority of the season. They were one of the first teams to get eliminated from playoff contention. Regardless of conference, the top 4 teams would go to the playoffs. Every team except New York and Houston were fighting for those last 2 spots, with Houston holding the number 1 spot. Towards the end of the season, the Charlotte Sting were making a push to stay in the playoffs. They were going up against the Rockers, as their records were basically identical. One of these key games was against the Houston Comets, where the Sting broke a WNBA attendance record. With 18,900 fans in attendance, they would take the win over the Comets, their eventual playoff opponent, and stay ahead of the Cleveland Rockers in the playoff standings a little while longer. On the last day of the season, the Liberty beat the Rockers, putting out their last hopes of a playoff appearance. The Charlotte Sting beat the Utah Stars, taking their playoff hopes into their own hands. In an overtime win over the LA Sparks, the Mercury beat their conference rivals for a spot in the playoffs. The WNBA playoffs in 1997 were single elimination games, so there will be only 3 total games to decide the first champion. The Houston Comets took down the Charlotte Sting 70-54. The New York Liberty took down the Phoenix Mercury 59-41, and the New York Liberty and Houston Comets would meet for the championship game. The Liberty and the Comets meeting in the last game was one for the scriptwriters, as they were both the top teams throughout the season. Cynthia Cooper would hit her Raise the Roof celebration a few times in this game. While it went back and forth for the most part, Cooper was just unstoppable. The Comets led by 4 at the half. A deafening crowd and 2 teams leaving it all out there, Cynthia Cooper would hear MVP chants in front of her Houston fans as they got the job done. On April 30th, 1997, the Houston Comets became the first WNBA champions. Cynthia Cooper and a suffocating defense from Houston beat Rebecca Lobo, Teresa Weatherspoon, and a pretty deep New York Liberty team. Cynthia Cooper won Finals MVP, as well as regular season MVP. She led the league with 22.2 points per game, as well as leading the league in 3-pointers. Teresa Weatherspoon won the first Defensive Player of the Year award, as well as leading the league in assists and steals. Lisa Leslie led the league in rebounds, and the only other awards that first year were Peak Performer Awards, which went to Andrea Congreves and Hexia Zing. The Sportsmanship Award also went to Zing, and the Coach of the Year would go to Van Chancellor, the Houston Comets coach. That would tie up the first season for the WNBA, which for the most part was a success, with over 1 million listed in attendance over the course of the season, and the finals bringing in 725,000 viewers. Capitalizing on a good start, October 1st, 1997, the WNBA announced that franchises in Detroit and Washington would be awarded for the 1998 season. The next allocation draft, expansion draft, and college draft were then scheduled for 1998. The league would move the Houston Comets to the Western Conference, evening the conferences to 5 teams each, as Detroit and Washington would both go to the Eastern Conference. 1997 for the WNBA had to be a little wild. First time for the league, still ironing out rules and details. Single elimination playoffs sound intense. It really could have went either way at that level. The Houston Comets and Cynthia Cooper were stars, highlight plays for the league, putting up a show for the crowds. While the ABL was still around, the league would fold in December of 1997, leading to the first influx of ABL players flocking to the WNBA. The WNBA had the edge of playing in the summer and the financial backing of the NBA, specifically setting themselves up for longevity and success over flashy salaries. Playing in the summer also helped the players as they could play for overseas leagues in the WNBA offseason. And while the WNBA encouraged their players to play for other leagues like the ABL did not. So the players were mostly guaranteed to make more money in other leagues overall. So with the 1997 season in the books and the WNBA looking forward to the 1998 season, adding 2 more teams and hopefully a lot more fans. We'll tackle the 1998 season in a separate video, so thank you for watching. We've got a lot more women's basketball information and history to share, so we'll catch you in the next one.
You need to Leslie. Center, LA Sparks.
Yeah.
New York is gonna shut you down. Unless.
New York's gonna what?
I said unless. Here, try these tomorrow night.
What's this?
It's what's gonna get you over the hump against New York.
What?
Use those in the second half. Catch him off guard.
I'll show these to Coach.
Whatever, suit yourself.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, players.